Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Radiant Others, a klezmer podcast led by me, Dan Blacksburg. You're a klezmer trombonist, composer, teacher, blah, 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 recording, as always, from my West Philly basement. Today, it's our penultimate podcast of 2025, and we're delving into the rarefied and mysterious musical form Khazones. Khazones is a Yiddish term for the work of the synagogue cantor or chazan. It is a form of music that is music, prayer, speech, and more all at once. Today, we're going to talk with two incredible musicians who I deeply, deeply admire, Judith Berkson and Jeremiah Lockwood. They have so much in common, and they do so much on their own in terms of composition, leading bands, and all that stuff. But they have come together to create a new cultural organization and record label, Khazones Underground. Khazones Underground is celebrating its start with 3 inaugural releases. Count them, 3. That's 3 new albums of classic and new music sung by the most dedicated musicians of the craft today. I'm proud to call Judith and Jeremiah my colleagues, and I'm excited to talk to them about the depth and beauty of Khazones, their personal histories and relationship with it, and why they're putting all of their considerable musical might behind this new endeavor. We take a lot of time to shout out the Khazones, the women of the past and present who sang Khazones with awe-inspiring might. This is a chance to open your mind up to a vast mystical world of Jewish music with a storied past and, thanks to Khazones Underground, a bright future. Whether you're a big fan of Radiant Others or you're just hearing us for the first time, we appreciate you coming and listening. And we also ask you for your support. Rate us and review us on any podcast platform you find us on, as many stars as they can give. And also, we do need your money. So you can subscribe at Patreon, Patreon/Radiant Others, and make a one-time or a monthly donation. We'd really appreciate it. You can also find us at tiptopjar.com/Radiant Others and give us some help that way. We really appreciate it. It helps us do what we can already and helps us dream and hope for even more. So thanks very much, and without further ado, here's my conversation about the Khazones Underground with Judith Berkson and Jeremiah Lockwood. Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Radiant Others, a klezmer music and more podcast. And I am so excited to be joined today by colleagues, friends, people I deeply admire. We've got Judith Berkson and Jeremiah Lockwood, and they are here to talk about everything, but specifically this new venture of theirs, Khazones Underground. So, hey, everybody, and thanks so much for being here.
Hey, Dan.
Good morning,
Thanks
Dan.
for having us.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. You know, I've known both of you for a really long time and worked together in a lot of different ways or oblique ways or direct ways or and like I said, just a super admirer of both of your work, both, in sound and around sound. You do so many different things, composing, performing, different genres, things that are within Jewish music, things that are like totally outside of Jewish music, or at least mostly outside of Jewish music. And, but you have something specific that you're like coming at today, which is that you're from your deep love and engagement with Khazones, which I'll let you define in a minute. You have this new thing, Khazones Underground. So, I think that in a way, we love to talk about this both in terms of what we're going for, but also in terms of like our own journeys and our own artistic practices and stuff like that. So let's start with, let's give the people, at least a brief description is what is Khazones Underground, what is Khazones, and why underground?
Okay, Khazones is the music of the cantor. Chazan is the Yiddish Lashon Kodesh word for a cantor, and Khazones is the musical culture around prayer. It's a form of musical speech. It's something that is supposed to be both an art form and also a kind of practice, a kind of it is both a performance of musical performance and a performative speech act that does something in the world, creates certain kinds of social experiences for human beings who are living, and also for the dead, and also in the spirit world. It's connected to the transcendent qualities of speech, the ability of speech to mean more than its literal static value. It creates a second layer of meaning. It's a kind of a musical form of Kabbalism, right? That creates other forms of knowledge and other forms of ways of understanding texts and social practices. Chazonis, what we call Chazonis today, is music that's recorded on old records mostly, and from that were recorded around, the early 20th century, when cantorial music experienced a period of popularization as a kind of Jewish pop music in the United States and in Europe. Chazonis is both those sounds that are heard on old records and also the practices of cantors in the synagogue. But as we'll probably talk about more, those practices in the synagogue are a much smaller part of what Chazonis is today than old records are, and people listening to old records and re-experiencing the music through old media. Chazonis Underground has to do with this experience of old media, memories about old people singing Jewish music in the synagogue, fantasies about what the experience of Chazonis meant for people who were huge fans of the music back in the day, fantasies about what Chazonis could achieve, about the greatness of cantors, the mythology about their incredible voices, their prestige, their artists' bipolar personalities as both sacred, Klei Kadoshim, and also as kind of bohemian performers. So Chazonis Underground is about trying to re-inhabit those ideas in the present day and create new art forms that make reference to this experience around Jewish sacred sound in the past, specifically through the experience of Yiddish-speaking Jews and their descendants.
Well, I suppose underground, because it's been the practice of Khazones has been a bit kind of diminishing or fading over the past 50, 60 years, and maybe not that quite that long, but yeah, maybe 50 years at least. And so in a way, the music still doesn't have its space in the synagogue in some instances, it's mostly practiced by, or we've come to understand it to be practiced more privately outside of the synagogue and in private in a certain way by practitioners and people who are just kind of doing it on their own and maybe in very small groups. And so hence kind of this underground network that we've been discovering of people pursuing this music. And everything Jeremiah just said about Khazones is just, so beautiful. I love how he puts into words just everything I felt my whole life. It's just wonderful to hear. But if I just could add one thing, I think that this idea of Khazones, I think it's always been a very mysterious practice. It's not even though there are institutions now where you can study to be a cantor and there are pedagogies, they're in fact just that, like these pedagogies that sort of break down certain aspects of the music, of how to do it, the kind of the nuts and bolts, but really, in a sense, the real, it's sort of a deduction of what it is, because it's this improvisatory, very intricate, very virtuosic practice that it's a very mysterious thing how it synthesizes, and there really is no clear pathway to how to attain it. People studied with, you know, you studied, maybe you started as a mashor, you sang with a chazan, but then over time you maybe studied with the chazan or just were around them or around it a lot, and it's kind of by osmosis a lot of time. I'm not saying that people didn't work hard to achieve it and that it just they woke up and were like that. I'm not saying that at all, but there was definitely a lot of work involved in becoming, you know, a like very accomplished chazan. But it's a mysterious. There hasn't been really foundational texts about it throughout history, and I have my thoughts on why. But I just want to say that it's mysterious for even very educated, you know, knowledgeable Jews. It's not really well understood by the congregation. It's not really understood by rabbis. It's not really understood by a lot of people, and it's mostly something that has been through experience. It's beloved just through the sound, and almost that the not understanding of it adds to its power from the inside out. You know, people listening and people doing it, and there have been attempts, of course, at making a kind of a pedagogy even in the 19th century and earlier, but for the most part, it's shrouded in mystery, I think, truly.
That's great. And I think that that's a really good way to think about this, is that it's a world of sound. It's reaching beyond our world. It's inside of our world. It's inside of people, the singers and the people who are experiencing it. It's beyond that. And it's just, there's something about it that's just, you know, when you fall in love, you get struck by the bolt of lightning of like these recordings. And I know I can remember that. You know, I'd say for me, it was Leib Glantz, Shema, and it was the last like maybe 20 seconds of it. And there's this one sound that happens right near the end. I think it's really the second to last sound / phrase that he does before wrapping it up. And I couldn't believe what I was hearing. You know, I just couldn't believe that this was a human voice making this sound. And I don't think it would have the same impact on its own, like, you know, sampled or whatever. It's about getting there. And that's even on a 3-minute, you know, 78 recording. Who knows what it would have been like live. And, you know, that was a long time ago. But one of the things that I just had this experience at a concert yesterday for a wonderful audience in a different neighborhood in Philly than I usually get to perform in. The audience was, I sang to the promoter that usually when I play klezmer music, I play for either people who know way too much about klezmer music or people who think they know way too much about klezmer music. And I never play for a group of people who really generally know very little and also are really interested. But you know what? One of the things I have to tell them is that I didn't grow up with this stuff. You know, I started engaging with Yiddish culture, klezmer, and then everything else around 17, 18 years old. You know, people are like, well, you played with your father. And it's like, yeah, my father and I started reading out of the same fake books when I was that age, you know, at the same time. And so, you know, it's been just this like revelation after revelation and kind of discovery or rediscovery after rediscovery for me. And I was wondering for you both, what is your relationship to this music, this Khazones and the music and the stuff around it? And if it is in fact, and I'm sort of like, you know, suggesting the things I know, if it was in fact something that you did have sort of most of or all of your life, beyond that, what were the things that you sort of received from the situations that you were growing up in or you were born into, and what are some things that you like found that like lightning bolt revelation where you really kind of like chose to grab it for yourself?
I don't know where to begin. I mean, yes, I grew up around this music. My dad's a cantor in synagogue, studied at the Jewish Theological Seminary, which is one of the main schools, and uh, he grew up singing, with his cantor. I grew up going to shul a lot, hearing my dad. My dad took me to many, many concerts. His best friend was a record producer of Khazones, and they were obsessed with Khazones. They were also bootleggers of Khazones live davenings, which is where they would go and record Khazonim, like in New York. My dad lived in New York, and in the late 60s, and kind of recorded a lot of Khazonim that were singing, and people from the old world, Europe, and were still alive. And he studied from these and played them a lot in the basement. I heard that stuff, but I can't really say that I sang Khazonis from a young age. I sang with my dad, but more in just a regular kind of singing voice. I think I was very afraid of it. I was sort of embarrassed about it. The emotion, it was too powerful. It felt too vulnerable at the time. I was young, can't do too much, vocally. Or my dad would try to, but I didn't really want to, strangely enough. And I don't know, just a lot of records, but still, like, I mean, I led mostly an American, normal life, just pop culture and everything. And it's just that it was always there in the background. Yeah, very, very much so, and very, I think going to shul a lot, that was a big, hearing my dad do the arc of the prayers, hearing from the beginning of the service to the end and all of the twists and turns. I didn't understand yet what that all meant, musically, but I heard it, and I was studying Hebrew, I speak Hebrew, so I was able to kind of put it together, little bits and pieces, how these words were meshing with the sound. It was just somewhere in my mind. Of course, I wanted to run 1,000 miles away from this tradition because I was sort of, it was so foisted on me, and everybody would ask me, "Are you going to be a cantor?" Very funny that as soon as I moved out of the house and I was at music school, conservatory, and Dan, because you went to New England Conservatory as well, and
yeah,
and Hank Snetsky is there, and he had this class about Khazonis, and he had the klezmer ensemble, and I had known Hankus I had seen him play when I was 5 years old. I might used to play with my dad, so I remembered him. And as soon as he's like, "Let's do some davening," and as soon as I opened my mouth and he was just accompanying me, and it was just coming out, it was just kind of there. I wasn't, I don't know, it's just kind of the beginnings of it, and of course, just it just reawakened it. I'm sort of telling my life story here. This is kind of embarrassing, but anyway, it was just percolating in my mind. And then, of course, I became just as obsessed as my dad. I basically became like my dad.
Amazing. Who knew?
This person that was, I didn't want to be anything like.
Yeah, well, that's how that goes.
I mean, no,
Unfortunately.
So, yeah, I became very obsessed with it. And it, yeah, just... So, but I think having those things in place, like just the sound in the back of my mind, going to a lot of shul, and studying Hebrew, I sort of had the ingredients for entering in it more quickly than other people. And I worked as a professional cantor from the age of 20 until today. It just was just there. But I think you could definitely develop it as well. You don't, it just might take a little longer.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. That's my story.
And what a great story.
Yeah.
Tip of the iceberg. Jeremiah.
That I'm still processing everything Judith just said.
That's okay.
It's very relatable. All the different aspects of her story. A little different because it wasn't my father. It was my grandfather who was the cantor in my family. But my dad was also very involved with cantorial music. My grandfather is my Jacob Konigsberg, who's my mom's father. Was well known cantor. He made a bunch of records and uh, had the old school aura of a star cantor around him, and definitely this idea of being at a remove from the experience of normal people was a big part of his persona, and being able to switch into different kind of gears of consciousness. He, every year before the high holidays, he would take a 2 or 3 month break from society and not see anyone
Wow.
other than my grandmother, so that he could so that he would be in perfect health. That was the major part of it for his voice, and then also just for him to kind of build up the nerve or the concentration to be able to do the kind of davening that he wanted to do. So this is like a kind of a cult of personality around him in my family. I would say, I mean, everyone admired him very much. My grandfather's uncle was also a well-known cantor named Jacob Lefkowitz, and he kind of inspired my grandfather when he was growing up. And Jacob Lefkowitz's son, David Lefkowitz, was a well-known cantor. He was the cantor at Park Avenue Synagogue for many decades. My grandfather's son, my uncle Josh Konigsberg, was a very fine cantor who had a long career, and he worked a lot with my dad. My dad wrote a bunch of music for him, including a Friday evening service, which was, I think I was maybe 9 or 10 when my dad wrote that, and that was a very definitive kind of part of my thinking about the music. And my cousin Zachary is a wonderful cantor. He leads a synagogue in Brooklyn. So the family's deep in the trade. I don't know about generations going back into Europe, but perhaps there were cantors before we immigrated as well. So I mean, growing up, it was very much a part of my life, and we sang in the family all the time. But like Judith was saying, as a kid, I didn't sing Khazones, and also my family, like my mom and dad and our household, was not religious. So like I didn't have any kind of formal Jewish education, and I mean, my mother had a sort of more or less like intentional break with religion, and so in terms of singing the music, I think I felt that I was not good enough. Like definitely growing up, I felt that I was not frum enough, or that I wasn't just on a high enough level of humanness, to be able to be a chazan. Uh, and when this thing that you were talking about of discovering music as a young adolescent, and like finding yourself in that, for me that had to do with listening to old records of blues music. And I my dad had records of Mississippi John Hurt and Robert Johnson, and starting at the age of 12, I listened to those records obsessively, and so that became my life as a musician. Kind of began with that, and then that's a whole other facet of my musical life. But it's not really separate. Somehow the two things have always been kind of entwined, because even though I spent many years playing with an elder blues musician named Carolina Slim, who I had a very close relationship with growing up, I felt on some level that I needed to be doing something with the Khazones legacy. And so that's like that question of what are you going to do with it has been an ongoing part of life for me. And so I've come up with different answers towards that over the years, but none of them are final, and it's always kind of preparatory towards the next iteration of how I'm gonna resolve the different aspects of self, and learning a lot of different kinds of things, studying the Yiddish language, doing a lot of work with cantors as an accompanist, scholar, record producer, archivist, different aspects of my work that I do, and trying to find a way to use the tradition in a way that is that works for me. Of course, that's the first, I guess, spot, but also just that's going to be useful to the community in different ways, and also different communities. Like it's not like I work with a lot of different kinds of people, and to me it's very important to be able to speak to different communities, and to have the like the openness to be able to find your place in different walks of life. And
Yeah, I mean, I think that's something that the three of us share very strongly in our own ways and in very overlapping ways. You know, I think about all the threads that I would love to have time to pull on from both of your stories, really to get a chance to talk about your own individual work as artists, which we will, and we'll find a place for that. But I also want to really give this particular venture this platform. I do want to take an aside moment just to shout out bootlegging synagogue services, bootlegging recordings, because I think that is, for those of us like me who kind of grew up with Judaism as a religion with a set of practices that are paramount rather than Judaism as a people or as a culture, whereas with a set of like experiences that you can value and interact with in different ways, like you do with the rest of your life or life in general. The idea of, you know, carrying a tape recorder or whatever under your clothes into a synagogue, let's say on Shabbos or on a high holiday, that's not allowed, right? So you would, but for whatever reason, I think it's just so wonderful because A, these things, how else would we have this information? And B, just such a wonderful little like poking the, you know, pin in the balloon of our understanding of what's going on with all of this. And so I just want to give a shout out to all those folks who just decided that it was more important to get this stuff on tape than it was to like preserve some particular halachic or understanding of something, you know? And that's just such a fascinating thing.
Yeah, I think that for my dad specifically, his was a desire to the obsession with the sound, obviously, and the voices, but you know, and the sport of it. It's like, you know, it's this incredible. I don't want to say sport, but it's similar in that, you know, I think it's also like just it was to learn because again, like what I said before, the tradition had. I think my dad recognized, and I think he was in school when a lot of these changes were coming into place, where the old world was sort of melting away. The pronunciation had changed, and that really, I think, did a certain kind of. I didn't take Jeremiah's word, a certain kind of violence on the music.
Yeah, I thought you were going to go there.
I'm sorry, but
that's okay.
You know, I mean, it just doesn't quite work. But even my dad he still does. You know, he'll do like the Sephardic way because that's the proper thing these days that you're supposed to do. But I think it's just like there was no real way to learn. He would say, oh, they taught us this scale, they taught us this mode, it interacts this way, but to actually do it, you're on your own. Or people just it ended up just doing the examples.
Right.
You know, some written examples of these amalgamations of what the music is. So he said, you're on your own. And so he wanted to learn how to do it. And that was the only way he could do it. And he studied from these recordings. Like I would hear him like speed it up, go back, speed it up, go over and over and over it. I didn't really know what he was doing, but now
yeah, now you get it.
Now I get it. Yeah.
Yeah, artists do what they have to, what it takes. That's creative people tend to do what it takes to get where they want in some level.
Yeah, but I was always like, why didn't anybody else do that? Why were you doing that? I just didn't understand his mind. Like, what made him want to do that, or why? I still can't quite get the answer. What drove him in that way, or what made him think to do it? I don't know. Maybe it had something to do.
That's a great question.
Yeah, I mean, he's a very complicated person, but I think maybe it had something to do with how he learns. Like, maybe he couldn't learn. Maybe it, you know, music theory and everything was not how he could parse it. Maybe just by listening is how he could do it. Like, I think that might have something to do with it.
It's like, I mean, the thing is, if you learn chess, you learn the rules of chess,
Hmm.
and you learn these openings and stuff, but then you go and study games, like actual full games that people play. Now, chess is something that you can record the entirety of the game in a certain way, right? You don't record the experience of actually having played that game, but you record all the moves of that game in a very systematic way, because that's just how chess is. And I can imagine that with a service, it's music sometimes is like a chess game, and I'm sure there are elements of, Khazones in it, especially in the context of a service, as opposed to in the context of like these sort of powerful specific pieces that then were used as recordings. That is kind of like putting together these games. So it's like you can't just learn it by learning the rules. You actually have to study the game. It makes total sense to me, and it's great. I have saved on a playlist a really wonderful Rosh Hashanah service with Pierre Pinchik davening that's like on YouTube, and somebody put it on YouTube. It's like 4 hours long or something total. It's just and there's a lot of just audio. It's just audio. Some dude, he's not pressing stop and start. They're not rolling the tape. They just rolled that tape and like let it go. It's so interesting, and like you said, I think it's about how you learn. It's a really great sort of window for both of you and for the people that you grew up around or knew who were involved in this. What kind of people find their way to this kind of practice? And like I said, it would be great to just talk to the two of you about your own work, and we're going to do something else here. Like, Khazones Underground is not just you two, it's a lot of other people. And how did your relationship to these other people, like, who are they somewhat, but really, like, how did this cohort kind of come together and grow? What were some of the, if there were any kind of like, magic moments, or just like what was the work slash, fun of over time that kind of led to all this?
The stories that Judith and I have told about our lives have maybe indicated a little bit. There are different kinds of communities that are involved in making this music over time, over history, and then in the present moment, when the music has a public reputation as being in a period of retreat or diminishment, right? That the major players in the music are dead, that synagogues don't really have cantorial davening anymore in the same kind of way that cantors did, 50 years ago or more.
Or people who are actually cantors on clergy staff. That's something that I
Yeah, well,
notice a
right.
lot.
Well, I mean, there are also the changes in the American synagogues, that the kinds of music that are done in synagogues is different. Basically, there's been a shift in the kinds of sounds that are heard in synagogues.
Yeah.
So the Khazones style is something that appeals to people for different reasons, right? So, but typically it's people who are trying to find some kind of an art practice that is driven by their interest in Jewish prayer, their interest in becoming practitioners in a profound art form that appeals to them on from a historical dimension or from a familial dimension, if they have family practitioners in the background, or just as a kind of kind of like a mythological source for truth, for the truth that music has to offer, right? And there's this kind of people have the magical moment of like discovering themselves in older forms of music, and why that happens for different people. Sometimes it can be quite mysterious, right? Why does a certain art form speak to you? So I was doing research about cantorial music. I was doing a PhD thesis and trying to. I knew I wanted to write about Khazones, but I wasn't exactly sure what the topic would be. And my original plan was to do archival research and then to work with a handful of elder cantors. And then I started becoming in touch with younger singers in the Hasidic community in Brooklyn, and became aware that there was a revivalist community around Khazones in the Hasidic community. And so I got more deeply involved with some of the some of the key artists in that scene, and I wrote my thesis about that. And my book is about the Hasidic cantorial revival scene. Golden Ages is the name of the book. And so I produced a record of singers in the Brooklyn Hasidic cantorial revival scene, that was inspired by the Kumsitz parties. So there would be off the grid parties in people's homes where people would get together and sing Khazones for each other. The practitioners just hanging out with each other. And the record, it initially came out, but it was the release got botched, and I was have been thinking in the past few years about how to broaden the circle. And so Judith and I have been friends for a long time, and our careers kind of parallel each other in a lot of ways. And then we started talking about what other records could we make that are going to embrace the other facets of the cantorial revival scene, because there are people outside of the Hasidic community as well. So we made a record of women singers of old-time cantorial music. That's a kind of a tribute to the Khazones, who were women performers of Khazones back in the early decades of the 20th century. And that record, I think there are 4 artists on that record, and they kind of speak to the different I guess maybe like potential places where new life is coming to the music. Judith's on there, and Rachel Weston, who's a cantor and a Yiddishist, and kind of pointing to the importance of this music to the Yiddishist community, where interest in Khazones has kind of like been flirted with, but it sort of has a somewhat nebulous relationship to Yiddish secular culture. The Ricky Rose, who's a woman who grew up in the Hasidic community and is, I would say, she's unusual, not in that she's a woman singing Khazones, but she's a woman singing Khazones from the Hasidic community who's willing to make a record, right? Like, so because she has this kind of insider-outsider stance of being both inside and outside the community, she's able to be able to break certain rules around restrictions on women's public performance and do Khazones for a mixed gender, a general audience. That isn't to say that she's the only Hasidic woman who's singing Khazones. She definitely is not. But I would say that it would, we'll see. I mean, look, we're trying to figure out other ways to document the women, the Hasidic women's Khazones scene, and that's a somewhat complicated ethnographic endeavor that involves a lot of different contested ideas about publicity and privacy in the Hasidic community. And then the 4th artist is Shahana McKinney-Baldwin, who's a wonderful singer and artist, and who's done a lot of different kinds of projects over the years, and is currently working on a project on Madame Goldie Steiner, who was an African-American woman, soprano, who sang Khazones back in the 20s and 30s, and there are no recordings of her. So Shahana's taken on this role of kind of arbiter of her voice, and does a show where she performs as Madame Goldie, and so she contributed a couple of tracks to the record, which are really stunning and beautiful. So the record, all told, it's the connecting point is the shared obsession with the Jewish past, with Yiddish culture as a productive point of new ideas about how to create Jewish sound in the present, but also points to the kind of like dispersion of Khazones throughout different corners of the Jewish world, and the ability of this music to convene people whose identities are on the surface somewhat different, but into a productive forward movement for the art form and for consciousness, and for the future of this legacy.
Ich denke hey noch meine kindische Jugend, Freitag bei Nacht bei mein Tatenstisch, nachdem wie man hat gegessen dem gefüllte Fisch, in mein Papa pflegt sagen, Korn Kadesh خروی هر بیم اویدال پیفولو ایش مخنه لئیش هالدی.
Yeah, I also just want to add that I think that what also holds it together, at least this iteration, is like the it's still or at least for me, I'll put it this way, and I think it's the clinging to a kind of it's the davening that is, it's the prayers that are holding it, that sound of the davening and of that kind of classic Khazones sound that we think of, we get from the records, but assuming that that had been in place for a long time, and so it's kind of tapping into that sound world. I think is also key, at least right now, or at least in this beginning iteration. How do you feel, Jeremiah?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's a kind of a philosophy about prayer and aesthetics and the importance of sound and creativity. Something about believing in the value of artists as arbiters of Jewish sacred experience, like what make room for people who will break rules in order to get what needs to happen, emotionally to happen.
True.
Right.
That's a big part of it. Yeah.
Yeah, we were just talking about that. These
Yeah.
guys were happy. They were breaking the rules because they needed to make it happen. And this is a conversation like I think the three of us have actually had before, which is just this like sort of this idea. I love that you used the word obsession because it's a word that's come up a lot for me in these conversations on this podcast, is like, wow, we're not just interested in this stuff, and one of the things that I think about that's glorious about our Yiddish cultural scene and our general, like the klezmer community, is that usually, and we know that it can be hard, but usually the the high level of obsession we have with this music and this culture and stuff is enough to bind us together through all of our vast differences, right? And just the group of people that you mentioned, the different groups of people that you just mentioned, I think share a huge, have some really big differences between parts of their expression of being Jewish people, or parts of their expression of being involved in Khazones. And, if you look at at least the American mainstream Jewish community, there's such a narrow idea of what it means to be Jewish, or what, are you Reform? Are you conservative? Are you Orthodox? Are you Hasidic? Never mind all the distinctions within, especially the Hasidic world, or like, do you do this or that? Do you speak Hebrew? It's just these, and those are all real, but they're also just some of the things. And there's so many other ways, other orientations, other ways of living that drive people in their Judaism. And I think, like you just, in a way, all these different people are such perfect, and yourselves also included, are such powerful examples of the fact that like sort of list of ways is really incomplete and really kind of, to me at this point, and has maybe been for a very long time, extremely boring. No offense to everybody who's really following that kind of way of looking at, like, dividing themselves up, but it's these other ways of connecting, whether it's through the sound helps, because there's a level at which just experiencing having a sonic experience, especially one is like sort of, I don't know, full of fire and spite and flavor as, these classic cantorial recordings from these like men and women. Cause I'm so grateful, especially to have learned about more of the women who were doing this stuff back in the day. Those records are just as kick-ass. And it's a huge, I wish, of course, it would be great if this person that you mentioned was recorded, and that we could figure out, but also we get to, this is I saw in a lot of your Instagram stuff, you're using the word revival that was used in the klezmer context. And and you mentioned the revival scene. So this is a way a lot of people who are doing this feel as though there's something that needs reviving. And sometimes, if you take revival like reanimation, like, some science fiction or some fantasy kind of thing, sometimes you have to like rebuild with materials that weren't there before because some of this stuff gets lost. And I think it's very true of klezmer music. And we don't acknowledge that enough, how much of it is it's like recreation. It's recreated. It's created. You've created something new that is also something old. It's a very interesting experience that is sort of, it can break your brain a little bit, but there's this way in which the things that divide us are so much less important than the things that unite us. And the things that unite us in this case are musical, but they're also so much more than that. And they're different than what usually people would think. Like, your average person who had like a synagogue upbringing, conservative-ish like mine, would have thought, if let's say you didn't have experience with these kind of worlds, that's how they wouldn't know that there are all these other ways of relating to all of this tradition, sound, practice, stuff that's present. And yeah, I don't know, you can jump in there or I can turn it into a question.
Oh, I just had I just thought of something I wanted to add from what you're saying just now, Dan, which is when it's an obsession, but I feel like it's also like a compulsion. Like I feel compelled to. I feel that when I'm singing Khazones, it's not. I always kind of say this, and it's not really me. I feel like it's a channeling of these past voices that are coming through as my embodiment of this sound, and I'm compelled to do this. And I don't really know why. I could be doing other things. And I know for Jeremiah too. It's like, his whole PhD was on Khazones. I mean, it's like he's involved in lots of other things, and it's just like this major compulsion to want to bring forward this sound. I don't know why, but I think it's important. I think it's powerful and beautiful. I feel like it's the past speaking to us, and it's also, also the endless skill and virtuosity that it holds makes me feel more spiritual or something as I try to attain it. It's like trying to touch God or something. You keep trying to reach, and that this whole practice has that as part of its central like workings, is that all of that virtuosity is not to make yourself feel like important, but is to have the experience of being in the divine realm. At least that's how I view it. So yeah.
That's awesome. Thank you. And I love that you took it there. Like, I take it to the next level. Like, it's not just obsession, it's compulsion. And I think that goes along with all these like ways of relating to it, whether it is like carrying a tape recorder under your coat or whatever. I just want to give a shout out to another podcast that I've just discovered and fallen in love with. It's called Versus VS. It's from the Poetry Foundation. It's these two Black poets who are talking about with other poets and other artists, writers, about different things. And they're so brilliant. They started this episode that I just started listening to on Burnout, where they say, what do you wait for permission for as an artist? And I'm like, oh God, we don't have enough time to talk about that. But I just want to say that, like, hearing what you're saying, I want to offer everybody that is full permission to be compelled to follow that, right? Like, maybe it's your path, maybe it's your personal history, maybe it's just your unique, relationship to sound in the world, but you give yourself permission to turn yourself over to those forces that you just described, right?
I don't even know if I want to, it's not my choice. I don't have any, there's a lot of other things.
There are a lot of other things you do.
do.
But I know for people who maybe haven't found themselves into this position where it's just unavoidably pouring out of you, go for it. Give it a shot. That's a good way to live too, you know? And I think that's probably true of almost everybody that you're engaging with in this project. So this record that you just mentioned, is that out? Is that coming out? What's the deal?
Yeah, the Khazones Underground is an idea. It's a community of people. It's kind of an advocacy, educational group, but it's also a record label, and that's probably the most visible and important element of it in terms of how we'll be available to the world. And we have 3 records coming out in December. So
there you go.
So these 3 records are Golden Ages, which is Brooklyn Hasidic Cantorial Revival today, and that's a kind of a reissue of the faltering first attempt to release the record a few years ago. The second record is The Return of the Immortal Khazones, which is this tribute to the women's cantorial voices of the early 20th century, featuring the artists who I spoke about briefly before. And the third record is the new Sway Machinery record. Sway Machinery is my cantorial-themed project that I've been doing for a very long time now. But we haven't made a record in a long time. So this is our first record in 10 years. And it's specifically focused on these obsessive collectors of live davenings. So the record is all I took clips from live davening, bootleg recordings of services, and created new music that are based on those fragments.
That's super cool. And the fact that it's coming out in December is great, because that means we can get this out before it happens.
Amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So, can you both just give a little bit of experience? So, like my experience with with Khazones cantorial music is like, I made the record I put out in 2017, Radiant Others, has a Leib Glantz piece on transcribed for trombone and electric guitar. And, it's funny. I like to take things and sort of just shift them a little bit to the side so that they're like 90% the same, but you just change enough about them that it has a completely different experience. So you take the organ part of Tal, which is one of his big pieces, Leib Glantz's big pieces, and you to put it for like heavily distorted, incredibly loud electric guitar. And it's just, I don't know, I think it's about 85% the same. Organ is a grand instrument. Loud electric guitar is a grand instrument. Trombone is a grand tenor voice. Khazones is a grand tenor voice. I'm not trying to I'm not very good at reinventing the wheel whole cloth, but I do find these ways to sort of like find the parallel universe kind of thing version of it. And so but again, that's a piece, right? Actually, this is we can go a little more of the technical thing. That is a composed piece he composed that piece, right? Glantz composed Tal. So that's a composed piece that is, I don't know whether it was a kind of piece that could be of different lengths, but certainly there's a version of it that fits on a 78 RPM, right? And that's the piece that I played, right? So, and then to go back to this idea, because we're talking about it Khazones is a part of spiritual life in the service, in the synagogue. These are much different very different time scales. So like, what are some of the differences, or what are some of the elements of what it means to be doing this music, let's say, in that performative style? I think about the pieces that you've written, Judith, that I've shared tons of times, being like, this is freaking Jewish music, guys. Like, stop fucking around. Here's the bar. Like, here's what you got to aim for, and then actually doing it in a synagogue service. Like, what are the sort of like overall things that you do, and what are sort of the specific differences, like, between what you're trying to do there? Like, what are the links, and what are the differences?
Well, it's a dance. It's a give and take, because there are certain expectations. I'm not like so my head in the clouds to know that like I can just do whatever I want in the service, because there are certain expectations and practices, and I respect those, and I understand that this is an evolving thing. Like, how do I incorporate the Khazones into my regular, just normative service. And the thing is, for one thing is like, I basically always do, because I don't know how to do anything else. Like I don't know how to daven in another way. So I do. And people are cool with that. Like I daven, and I just don't, okay, also I wouldn't do it in any other way. And I don't know how to do it any other way. I do intersperse it with songs that they know, and, very congregational melodies. But then how do I like insert my own my own pieces? And I have to just say courage. Like I just have, it's just courage. Even though like I perform a lot around the world, there's still this part of me that's like, I'm one person, and there's this huge thing, and this thing happened where services changed and things evolved, and I'm waking up and it's 2025, and like this is the reality. So my strategy is sort of like our friend Yoel Cohen, who is on the record that Jeremiah was talking about, of the Brooklyn Hasidic Cantor revival. He always says, like, if I'm not improvising on a service, like it's not fun for me. It just doesn't make any sense. I need to, or else I'm not engaged. And so similarly, like, not just improvisation, but if I don't bring in a piece of my own, one or two every service, it's just meaningless to me. Like I don't feel connected to it. It's not fun. So I try to bring in my own pieces. I try to do something new, a bit of Khazones, something I've studied every time. That's not even just my normal davening, but a little more and a little more. And every concert I do at the temple, and every service I do, I just keep replacing things slowly over time, because it takes a while to amass like these pieces and stuff. So that's been my strategy, and I feel like, and most people don't even know their mind. I don't really advertise it as such necessarily, right. Or if they actually have no idea, which is fun, because they just sing it. They start singing it, and I do a lot of like congregational antiphonal, like try to get people involved. But some of it's, and I go on the spectrum of being a little more outside or even traditional, and then a little more, and I keep just adding and replacing and adding and replacing. And people seem to be cool with it. And, it depends on where you're at. I've been in shuls where they're more knowledgeable or more traditional, and you can do more, even more. But I don't know. I would say that the thing is, if I'm not doing like the real Khazones, it's like the whole magic of the service makes no sense if you're not inside of it somehow, at least somewhat. Like the prayer, it's just like singing, and I know the difference. Like one feels a completely different way, and I feel like it would be a disservice to everybody if I was just not going to that place. And I try to go to that place every time.
Good day to thee, Lord God Almighty. I, Levi Isaac, son of Sarah from Berdichev, here am I before thee with a grave and earnest plea for this, my people. What do you want of your people? What have you demanded of your people? For everywhere I look in Torah, it says, say to the children of Israel. And every other verse says, speak to the children of Israel. And over, Tzav es b'nei Yisrael, tatin you, kama umois ba'olam, bavlaim, parasayim, edomayim.
So okay, I'll put this to our scholar Jeremiah. Like now that you've made a record of just the music from these services, what kind? And I'm sure, and you've made records adapting the music of these sort of like show pieces or like these standalone pieces. Like what? How did they strike you differently? I mean, yeah, how did they lead you in different directions artistically? But also like what did you learn from going to the services after, as opposed to these like, big pieces?
Yeah. Well, it's an incredible question, and it's not an easy one to answer because the records are trying to pull into one 3.5 minute long record the feeling of
Totally.
this 3 hour long durational performance of vibing out and getting into trance and bringing the people together and being able to have periods that are slow and boring and other parts that are incredibly virtuosic and parts where everyone's just making noise davening to themselves. There's so many different kinds of sounds that are involved in a traditional Jewish prayer service. So the cantorial records are kind of like a fantasy around that are built around all of those different sounds. And in the best records by these kinds of masterful composers like Glantz or Pinchik, who you mentioned, they're kind of like modernist composers who are making reference to all these different kinds of sound objects, some of which are very clearly drawn from Jewish folkloric sounds, from Hasidic sources. These are very sophisticated musicians who, they're drawing on 19th century Romanticism and 20th century classical music as well. Glantz especially. I mean, Glantz was a wild man. He was a very brilliant musical thinker and who was very deeply attuned to this kind of like Russian nationalist composers of like Mussorgsky and Prokofiev, people who were using folklore in their music that was chromatic and technically and psychologically, kind of challenging music. Yeah, I mean, we could do a whole thing about Glantz. I mean, there's a lot to say about him, and I've done covers of a lot of his pieces over the years, and find him to be one of the great composers of Jewish music, and using those pieces, but those pieces would find their way into live davenings. So, like, someone in the middle of a davening doing a part of Glantz's, I forget what we were talking about, Shema Yisrael. Like that's not at all uncommon to hear when they get to the Birkas Kohanim part of the repetition of the Shemona Esrei. You get to the paragraph where that text is from, and then they'll just do a part of that piece, So there's a kind of a fluid relationship between the art object version of the music and the music in situ. So they're not like worlds apart from each other, both because of the flow in both directions, that the showpieces were created with the psychological and musical apparatus of a live davening built into them, and then the live davenings are influenced by the records, right? And that's not like new. That's going back to the back to the olden times. And like what Judith's thing that she's talking about of being a cantor in the synagogue and building her own nusach in a way. I mean, like it's based on the older sounds, of course, but like constantly creating new music. That's also very traditional. I mean, Judith's. I think you said before, like she sits the bar. She's in so many ways. I mean, she's an amazing composer and a profound musical thinker, but also like deep in the tradition and doing the kinds of work that the cantors did in the old days. And so I work with cantorial archives, and you see that a cantor over the course of their career, they'll accrue a collection of thousands of pages of them writing out the service over and over again and trying, creating different pieces or transcribing things. Yep. And so that's part of the tradition also, the cantors being literate musicians, being deep thinkers about the music, collecting a lot of different people's approaches, and like this thing of like transcribing the traditional chants that people call nusach hatfilah, like just the kind of the basic melodies for the different parts of the service. There are literally hundreds of different versions of this. I'm like going through the collection of a elder cantor like Robert Keevel, who passed away a few years ago, who I did a lot of work with his collection. He had like dozens of different complete, notations by different cantors of the entire prayer services for all of, for Shabbos and all of the Yom Tovim, and like there's so much music. It's incredible, and that is also relates to the way the services work. There's so much music in a you've got time. It's Shabbos. Like, we're not going anywhere. This is going to take a while. People can go in and out. Maybe in some ways it echoes the sociality of like a Indian classical music concert or something like that. People will go out and have a little like a break, go have a snack in the middle of the service for a while, and then come back in. And there are a lot of different moments in the service where there are places for the show pieces. Right, so I was working for the last few years, singing in the choir with Berkson Miller, who's a great cantor of the, kind of the old school, one of the last cantors in the States, born in Europe, who's still working, and unfortunately he passed away in March.
He was an old school cat for sure. I mean, I got to meet him at the Krakow, mostly through the Krakow Jewish Culture Festival. There's some really fun videos of us on the festival stage there. I love what you're saying, because it's like, going back to this idea of permission, it's like, this is just what artists do. I was talking to a bunch of jazz guys the other day, and they were saying exactly the same things. And I know all of us have connections to like sort of different kinds of jazz and black music and avant-garde music, and this guy was like, oh, Roscoe Mitchell, the improvising saxophonist, composer, great brilliant AACM person, he creates his compositions by improvising a ton, and then he records them and transcribes his own pieces and then hands them to somebody else to play and go, good luck, motherfucker. Like this is just what artists do. So, like, the question I had was, like, what are some of your current relationships to the different communities that have mostly or fully left this kind of practice behind? And, like, Judith, you were really clear about how you bring this back in when you have the platform, right? But I think one of the things that I experience in some of the communities that I'm in is this is something we talked about before, I think, even the idea of this as an art form is something that people struggle to get their hands around, like they wrap their minds around, their hearts around. The idea of an artist who is maybe, one of the qualities of this thing we're talking about is someone who's obsessed and compelled, and as being sort of like, I don't know, a sort of spear point. Let's call it like a point of access to the, higher realms, so to speak, to the spiritual divine worlds, rather than a leader, someone who you say, I'm giving my experience over to you. And so that's the experience that I have in relationship to this kind of practice, this Khazones practice, is that the thing that it feels farthest from is the idea of actually like sort of really investing a single person with that role and what you could gain, and the people are so focused, and I understand, like we could talk about the history of this. I recently, who knows if this explodes the conversation, but I recently had a somewhat deep dive re-listening to the catalog of Debbie Friedman for some strange reasons, and I learned a lot about what it is and what it isn't, and it was not what I remembered. It was different than I remembered. It was like harder and fierier than I remembered. That's basically like the takeaway. Even though all those songs are exactly what they are, full Americana, acoustic guitar, camp sing-alongs, like all that stuff. And, I think a lot of people would point to that as like, oh, there's the break or whatever, but that's not really what it is. That was just something that happened. What's it like trying to sort of be either being an artist, like in that sense, and sort of stand up and like, what would you want people... Like someone who you're not going to, I don't know if you've ever experienced anybody who says, I don't like this, we don't do things this way, or whether it's more like sort of this flattened out, like, what? What's going on? And, like, what do you want people to know about, like, what is this thing? It's like, this is the opportunity to like say, this is what's so incredible about having a person, an artist, as this sort of point of entry for the community, or this sort of leader, role. Like, that's different than, I think, at least in my experience, a lot of people see like a service as like the point of a service.
I think I understand what you're asking. And it's a great question, and it's very pertinent to this moment in time, I think. But yeah, I think that, to be honest, I am, and maybe cantors in the past as well, but I feel like I'm more comfortable presenting this music amongst a crowd, like within a concert setting or outside of the synagogue, like a record or a concert, or around people that understand and appreciate it, where I can really open myself up and really go the distance and really be that vulnerable and bring in my newer takes on it, on Nusach as well. And by the way, my newer takes, I am still, like what Jeremiah said, it's very important. Like I feel it's important to do something innovative or new with the music, or else actually I don't think it really transmits either. You can't just recreate, you need to do something new. I think I really believe that. I don't know why. Jeremiah probably could tell you why, but so I just totally feel that in my bones. You have to do something slightly. You have to push forward, or push yourself and do that for it to really have that transcendent, like that spiritual experience. But anyway, so I feel more comfortable in a concert setting. And yet I know the value of putting yourself in uncomfortable situations. I think it's important as an artist that you're able to present your music wherever and however. And I challenge a lot of people to go into a synagogue and do their music, It's like, whatever genre, those are just people, regular people. And I think it's a good challenge. It's a good thing. I think I've always been wary of the idea of the cantor, that I think sometimes a lot of its judgment or downfall had to do with the cantor being this kind of, like it's an ego, like it's about them, and it seems like it's about this person that's just, the star and has this voice and can do everything, and it's about them. And I've always been wary of that. And maybe I don't know. I feel like in everything I do, I try to dislodge that through my sound and my manner and what I'm trying to do with the music. To try to, even though I feel it's superhuman, and I'm not saying I'm superhuman. I'm saying the art form is very difficult. Like Jeremiah's grandfather had to go away for 3 months to prepare. Like, I wish I had that. Like, that's exactly what it needs. Like, you need to prepare. It's physically, mentally, spiritually. So it's superhuman, and people are afraid of that, and sometimes they don't even know that, and they don't understand how much work this is. But I don't want it to be about, so I have to kind of trick them and temper it, and so trick them to know that I am sort of channeling, and I am that leader, but I am not the focus. And that's what I do every week. I try to be that person that's leading, the spiritual leader, and enter that realm and be okay with that. But also make sure that it's not really about me being Judith, That's the dance that I do every week. So I don't know. I'm talking all this crazy stuff.
No, but I mean, we're talking about the highest levels of spiritual expression. What else? How else are you going to use? What other language we have, And I think it's a really good point that you made, because, like, whether these people, I'm sure many of the people who were the cantorial stars of the Golden Age, like you said, Jeremiah, they knew they were stars. They sort of carried themselves through the world. They were stars. They demanded a certain level of treatment by their fans and people who were hiring them, that they were stars. And, especially the men, right? Because these we're talking about mostly men. And I'm trying to think of the few guys who I've met, and even some of that, it was sort of like, it was sort of like meeting a Placido Domingo or somebody like this. I can think of somebody who was also a performer in the Krakow Festival several times, and the energy again was like, it was like being around one of these opera stars, and it's a star, and I think like there is sort of the danger there as much as there was sort of like the excitement there,
Right.
on some level.
I'm not saying it's wrong. In fact, I think in some ways it's actually good. Though. It's good to be that because it's actually good. I've learned that it's good, but that's my little Achilles. Like I have a hard time with that, walking into that, just that kind of thing.
I'll say one of my favorite experiences of music and this kind of thing was this guy. I did this project called The Other Europeans, which it brought together a lot of different people from a lot of different cultures. One of those guys was this accordionist Peter Ralchev, who is just absolutely like stunning, jaw dropping, mind boggling, and he danced this dance very well, especially in sound checks where he was absolutely uncompromising about what he needed and ruthless in pursuit of what he needed, and he wasn't an asshole about it. And I just thought, like, this guy is neither too pompous nor too humble. He's like just right, go for that. Because like you do need both, right? You need to live in your badassery, and I know you do, Judith. You're good at that.
I did want to say I did want to go back. I said I misspoke earlier. So the Shema Yisrael by Glantz is actually it's in the Kedusha, so it would occur in the service. It's sometimes used by cantors as an interpolation into their repetition of the Shemona Esrei when they get to the Kedusha. His Birkas Kohanim record is also another very famous piece that cantors often reference in this way of bringing elements of a recording into a live service. Okay, I just wanted to have that you can fix that mistake in the edit later, and then I don't want to mislead anybody into thinking that there's no Shema Yisrael in the Birkas Kohanim.
You gotta represent.
I thought there was something else that
Judith,
you were talking about.
You knew I made a mistake. You could have corrected me.
I didn't. I was like, maybe there is something I missed.
No,
she trusts you.
I made a mistake.
Don't betray that.
And
trust.
then the other. The other thing I was going to say was just that this idea of participation and presentation. What's the difference between participating in a musical experience and being a recipient in a musical experience? And so I think Khazones kind of offers a challenge to this division between participation and presentation, which in the ethnomusicological literature, that's a division that appears as in some ways a kind of a very hard and fast organizational difference. Some kinds of experiences involve everybody singing and dancing and making the music together, and some kinds involve people passively receiving music, like in a European concert hall. And I just think that needs to be mixed up in the blender a little bit. Like that is wrong. Like when people go to their most profound musical experiences, they are not passive, and they are also involved in making the music, right? I don't know. I mean, what kind of, like, when we talked like the jazz club experience, right, where there's this kind of synchronicity between the improvisation that's taking place and the response of the audience. And Khazones is definitely in this mold of there being. Not to say that it's. I'm sorry, it's not coming out of the jazz experience, but it's. I'm making a analogy. That it is in this frame of social organization where the sounds that the people are making by doing their own davening, by their emotional response to the kinds of singing that the cantor is doing, it's fundamental to there's a give and take between these two things. And then furthermore, what kind of musical experiences do we want to have in life? What are the most profound musical experiences that we have? The listening experiences where that artist on that record or up on that stage is making us be a better version of ourselves, allowing us to be the kind of human being we want to be, and so I think the idea that the role of the Jewish sacred musician is only to foster everybody's doing the actual work of making music. That sometimes, but I don't think that should necessarily be viewed as the only possible outcome, the only possible musical behavior that's appropriate or possible, and that constitutes the only form of participation people can have, because being deeply moved by an artist who's speaking your language telling your story. That is participation on a very, very deep level.
Yeah, I mean, it reminds me of two things. One, it's like if you think a performer up on a stage doesn't need your energy, you're dead wrong. Like have the joy of playing with David Licht, the great drummer of klezmer music, all the time, and he's always saying like, I just needed something from the audience, and then it happened, and then I was really into it. And it's like, he sounds great all the time, so you're like, what are you talking about? But that's what he means. He's looking for that feedback loop. And of course, people who are historians love to say, well, that actually did used to happen, and like, why are we so fucking silent, in a concert hall or in a synagogue? I mean, I know why. It's like, I mean, I don't know the specifics, but these things were kind of enforced. And I think you're right. People they don't see themselves as having an important role to play as listeners or as participants or as people who are not, like, let's say, actively singing at that moment or something like that. But I think there really is a very important role for all of that creates the full experience, and everybody does have different role. And yes, the role of the Chazan is a big one with a lot of a lot of physical responsibility, like physical and mental responsibility. You need that endurance, you need that knowledge, you need that practice. But like you said, is it really going to come to life without putting yourself into it, being in the moment, being with everybody else, not just sort of like, doing it reaching for something greater than yourselves? I mean, what more are you trying to do at a synagogue than that on some level? It's really interesting.
Yeah. Well, like kind of what you said, Dan, about how I think that people were it's been ingrained, like, not to respond. And so certain more traditional places still have people kind of cacophony that you hear on, like, Jeremiah, the wonderful live davening on YouTube of Jeremiah's grandfather davening, and you can hear everybody just saying the responses with him and against him, and it's a lot of cacophony. It's incredible. I should play that, like, because I was about to say we need to educate people a little bit, kind of open them up to this experience and say, oh, you know how when we do the blessing of the Torah reading and you say Baruch Hu Baruch Shemo, like, and everybody says it, well, that translates, like, you can be doing that in the entire service. You don't have to feel that you inhibited. And so it's like we have to kind of do a bit of a what do you call it education, but like, re-indoctrinate, anti-indoctrination, bring it back to the old way.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that's great about art, especially art that's sort of directed towards spiritual transcendence or maybe even like physical transcendence, like dancing, is that it kind of rips away the bullshit. It rips away these layers of these sort of like calcified layers, at least for the moment while it's happening. Sometimes the music stops and they kind of just fall back in. I know that's true of me as a performer. I'm not like, however kind of like perfected human I feel, or like ultimate human I feel as like in the best musical experiences, I still have to like go to bed and wake up the next day. But it's an opportunity to like tear away these illusions and then find something else. And I do think that it helps people to like have a sense of like understanding that could happen, and to give themselves the opportunity to let because there's going to be a physical reaction to that, like a physical component, just like there's a physical aspect of like performing music that sometimes, especially for people who aren't singers, like you kind of forget you have a body sometimes, and that doesn't help anybody to play music better. But yeah, I mean, like, what are some kind of things that you think, what are some like little things that you just love the general population, the general Jewish population, to like consider? One of this is this sort of like live davening thing, and what that I think of that cacophony as like something that I just really would love for people to feel like pleasure in or comfort in. I mean, like, what are some of the things that you want, just out of a personal or maybe a theoretical desire, for like building the sort of literacy to create like the sort of, let's say, the fertile ground for moving this whole project forward?
Well, I mean, I'm mostly looking at it as art. I've never tried to be a pulpit cantor. I, so in that regard, what Judith's trying to do is, really amazing to me and inspiring, but also pretty different than the standpoint that I've come at it from, where maybe it's I don't have as much uh, idealism about synagogues, perhaps, as I should. Like that seems to be a space where it's very hard to do new things, but it's not obviously it's not impossible, and I'm looking at it as being something that's going to happen outside of the synagogue primarily. That in creative spaces, music venues, or people's homes, or just other places, people will get together and uh, do creative projects with the music, and that it'll come sort of mostly from the charisma and achievement of the people who are doing the music work, and then from there into other kinds of spaces where the people who are not the singers themselves, like the audiences, but like in this other kind of audience, like a participating audience kind of scene, that I believe that that's possible, and it would take kind of regular episodes of people doing it, right? So we're trying to start. I mean, we're having semi-regular kumsitz parties that are like, so in the Hasidic community, it happens that people throw these parties for for other male Hasidic singers. So Judith and I have been hosting some parties that open it up so that anyone can come. So people whose identities don't fit.
You got to come down.
Yeah. So
I'd like to come to any live events these days in my life.
Yeah.
You're always invited. We want you there.
Yeah. I want to be there for sure.
And then just having, I mean, to me, it's like it's the show, but the show could be other things as well as a show. I mean, the only time where I adopt the kind of like something like the identity of a cantor is for the high holidays, and I've been doing that for many years, where I lead a kind of like alternative type of service that's in a music venue for a community called Because Jewish, that was originally founded by a rabbi named Dan Ain, who's a friend and a fan of my music, and brought me in to do my versions of cantorial music as the liturgy for his high holidays. And so I've been doing that for like, I don't know, well over a decade now. So that's a regular happening that happens every year for Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. And now the Sway Machinery is with me performing. It started out with a smaller ensemble, but it's a full on. It's great. We have different guest artists. Yoel Cohn, who we've mentioned, is a frequent guest, but other artists from different walks of my musical life as well. And then the community that supports it is also in the music business. A lot of the kind of the heads of the community are people who are in show business, and they invite people to come and do guest performances as part of the service as well. So it's like a music-oriented high holidays experience, where the kind of the trad Jewish liturgical part is me singing Khazones.
But Jeremiah, we also, as part of Khazones Underground, we've talked about perhaps creating events where there are services, but it's like in a club, and kind of similar, where it was like one kind of dream thing for us is like to actually have like a service with full-on Khazones chanting. That's like a Khazones Underground event.
Yeah, we're building it up.
Like kind of old school. We're building up. So it's like we do envision this kind of potential for the synagogue or the liturgy to live outside of the synagogue and to be experienced for sure, and on the terms that we feel comfortable with, aesthetically.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. I've had this thought pretty much for a while in this conversation. It was like, what would the full-on, unfiltered experience be like?
You want to do it.
Yeah,
you're gonna do it.
Yeah, and also there are like 10 different versions of what it would be. I mean, because it's me and Judith, and each of us do something that's different from each other, and then also each of the people who we're working with and trying, and we're also trying to, develop the next round of records, and develop relationships with, or deepen our relationships with people who are in our network of practitioners who are doing stuff with the music. And so, I mean, yes, there will be more and more as time goes by.
Awesome. Well, I think that's probably a really sweet place to wrap up. So tell people where they can find more about Khazones Underground and you and all the other artists that you've mentioned.
Well, spelling Khazones is a little bit confusing. We're using Yivo orthography for the word. It's Khazones. And if you do an internet search on Khazones Underground, you'll find us very easily. We're currently building up the Bandcamp page where the records will be available soon. There's a placeholder webpage about Khazones Underground on my website now, but the full-on Khazones Underground website is coming down the pipeline soon. The record release event in New York City is going to be hosted at the Yiddish New York Festival, and that's going to be in December of 2025 in New York, but there will be other Khazones Underground record release events in other cities as well, on the West Coast and other cities on the East Coast. And it's all in development right now. So we're in a very busy period of organization and building. And we hope everyone out there will keep their eyes peeled for the new developments.
And don't forget about Instagram. You guys are you have an Instagram page.
Yeah, I was going to say that.
Judith's Instagram is very amazing, and everyone should follow.
Judith, you are rocking Insta. I told you this already. You are killing Instagram these days.
Oh, but I'm having a lot of fun with the Khazones Underground Instagram page. And so, yeah, all Khazones Underground info is there, and then a lot more and memes and whatnot.
That's good because, like you said, it's like we just kind of got to, in some ways, the only way to do it is to do it. And so you just have to start engaging with this world and then see what ideas come, see what inspiration comes, see how you get your ass kicked, get struck by that bolt of lightning of these performers, check out
I don't know. Also, I don't know if you're going to share any of the Khazones because we haven't played any music. It's kind of hard to think about the music, think about this without hearing it out of context. But if you go to because the Instagram page, there's lots of examples of Khazones singing that you can latch onto.
Yeah, and there's a ton on YouTube. So you can, all this stuff is very available these days, which is one of the glories of our current day. And I think, I'm excited for all this. I'll definitely try to make it to one of those parties sometimes. I'll say I'm really, really grateful for the place that this music has had in my life and the way that it's expanded me as a person and as an artist and connected me to Jewishness and also connected me to music, So everybody get into it. And thank you, Judith, and thank you, Jeremiah, and all the other folks who are part of this new endeavor. And we will keep following it. And, as it develops, maybe we'll have to come back around and see how you're all doing in some period of time. Thanks so much for talking with us.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you, Dan.
Well, that was my conversation with Judith Berkson and Jeremiah Lockwood about the Khazones Underground. I am in awe of their musical knowledge, their ability to realize it through sound, and their deep, deep love, obsession, compulsion, what you want to call it, with this incredible musical form. So go to their Bandcamp page or their website and listen to the new music, buy the CDs or digitally, whatever you want to do. And if you're in New York City on Tuesday, December 23rd at 7 p.m., there's going to be a Khazones Underground double release concert, Return of the Immortal Khazones and the Dream Past by the Sway Machinery, which is Jeremiah's awesome band. Go to YiddishNewYork.com to sign up for that and an entire 5-day program of incredible Yiddish music featuring almost everybody who's ever been on this podcast. So I hope to see you there. And stay tuned to this feed for some really, really amazing conversations that we've got coming up, especially the one that we're going to end the year with. I'm so excited to share that with you. With that in mind, I'm going to let you go. So I hope that if you're hearing this over the Thanksgiving holiday, that it's been good and sweet and delicious. And if you're hearing it when this comes out, of course, as always, good Shabbos.
Shmi